Prevention is better than cure. Maybe you are thinking about going to see your GP. Maybe you want to run some blood tests, but you don't know which blood tests are good for you, how to prepare for them, and maybe what is the cost, and how to ask your doctor to run these tests. And this is what the video is about. I'm going to show you how I write a letter for my GP and what I actually prepare for my clients, which markers are absolutely necessary for everybody to know where you stand, and then maybe some specific markers based on your health issues, but mostly how to prepare for these blood tests and when to do them. This is important, especially for women that still have a regular period, because there are certain markers that needs to be done in certain time. Ready? This is the recent letter that I wrote for my GP. And why do I actually write a letter for my GP when I go to speak to her? Because she needs to have mechanism, reasoning, and explanation for the insurance company. So, for example, if I'm going to ask for me as a prevention for DEXA scan, which is this X-ray to show if I am at the risk of osteopenia, osteoporosis, what is the fat and muscle mass. This is an expensive test. And I need to tell her that, for example, my mom was at the risk of osteoporosis, and from the age of 50, on a regular basis, she was doing this, and she's also doing the anti-resorptive therapy and many other issues. Because then, if there is a family history, it's a red flag enough for the insurance to cover the cost. If I am 35 years old and I say that I want it just for prevention or just out of curiosity, there is not a single insurance that would cover the cost. And the same is, for example, with vitamin D. And I tell you, you will see it, the vitamin D marker. I went the same day with my 16-year-old daughter. I wrote a letter for my 16-year-old daughter as well. But I received invoice for one marker and administrative cost 86 Swiss francs for my daughter, because they did not cover the vitamin D, because in their opinion it was not necessary. In my case, it was covered due to the osteoporosis. Yeah. So every time when you go to the doctor, there needs to be a reason. I'm also using hormone replacement therapy as a prevention of osteoporosis, so estrogen and progesterone. And for this reason, I want to check my levels, because I want to know if I'm overdosing or underdosing, because only on what's in my blood, and then I'm also running the urinary test, I know how much do I need. Is it 1 pump of estrogen or 2 pumps of estrogen? I don't want to have breast cancer. So I want to take only the bare minimum that I need for the bone health and the skin health and functioning of my organs. And the same goes with progesterone. So that's what I wrote here. And then I also did as a prevention MRI scan, because I had a little bit of pain in my calves and it didn't really seem it's from the exercise. And I had a little Baker's cyst, but it wasn't severe enough to do something. So I'm not asking for the physiotherapy at this point, but I might do it later on. Every time when I go to see the doctor, they don't like when you come with more than 2 issues. Okay, it should be actually only 1 issue. So 2 is kind of maximum. So in this instance, it was DEXA scan, prescription, and the blood tests. And as you can see, I explained everything, family history, I justified the vitamin D levels, and now we look at which tests I wanted and how much approximately it costs, so that you know. I write these letters for my clients that purchase the functional medicine package, even though I always ask them, is your doctor open to run the tests? Because usually when the doctor receives the explanation and the mechanism, they truly want to help their patients. But then sometimes there are doctors that have high ego and they don't want that a nutritionist or functional medicine practitioner is telling them which test they should do. And I would feel exactly the same. If you come to me and you tell me that another nutritionist gave you some list of supplements and you want me to check it and maybe give you opinion, I might not agree with what I see. And I might not be happy that you are trying to tell me what I should do, because everybody thinks that they know the best, and that we always want to help you in the best possible way. So we are looking at the standard markers. So we have their full blood count, which is usually red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. So red blood cells, as you know, there is a hemoglobin, and hemoglobin is bound to iron, and iron is then bound to oxygen. It carries the oxygen to every single cell in our body. And so if we don't have enough red blood cells, we might feel fatigue and we might have anemia. But when the red blood cells are large, this is called macrocytic anemia, and that might be a reason for low levels of B12. I also want to say that if you are taking medication, or you have H. pylori, or you have done genetic tests, you might know that you might not absorb B12, and so then you need to supplement it in methylated form. Yeah, I'm one of these people. If I was to show you my results, you would see that I need to supplement all the time because it's genetic. And then we are looking at white blood cells. So this is a police of the body, so this WBC, and we are looking at how many leukocytes, white blood cells you have, but then also lymphocytes. So we have innate immune system that is fighting something unknown. Yes, so it can have increased neutrophils. And then we have lymphocytes. So this is like T cells, T helper cells. They have been trained in the thymus, and they are fighting something on a cellular level. So we distinguish whether it's humoral in the blood, which can be like bacteria or some pathogen, or if it had already entered into the cell and it's replicating. So that's why we are running a full panel. And if you have some immune issues, I recommend that you watch the video about the specific immunity test with lymphocytes, where we are looking at how the immune system works and interleukins and so much more. But this is not what I'm running for me, because I don't have any issues with immune system. I'm running the basic white blood cells. And then we are looking at platelets, because platelets, if they are high, the blood is very thick and it might cause thrombosis, right? So platelets are also thrombocytes. And this can cause cardiovascular disease, so heart attack, stroke, and so on. And on the other hand, when we have very low platelets, you can bleed out. And this is usually when people have some allergies or the immune system is weak. It has been fighting for a long time. Then we are looking at creatinine. This is how your kidneys can filter. And the same is for urea. So urea is a waste product. And for example, if the kidneys are not working in a proper way, or if the body is not breaking down the amino acids, there is too much of the ammonia, and then it's like a stinky urine, there can be foam, and it's definitely toxic for our body. So we are looking at how much of the urea, the waste product we have. We are looking at uric acid. Uric acid is actually an inflammatory marker, one of the risk of cardiovascular disease. And maybe you know uric acid with the disease called gout. So this is causing painful crystals in a big toe. And people usually think it's because of purines and food, like meat, but very often it comes from fructose, and not fructose from fruit, because nobody is really overeating on kiwi and berries and so on. It's usually Coca-Cola sweet products and the cheap fructose syrups and so on. And there is like a lot of food that is increasing the uric acid. We are looking at sodium and potassium and chloride, because these are electrolytes. On every single cell in our body, we have sodium potassium pumps. So we need sodium and potassium to open, take something inside the cell and then outside the cell. And chloride, when it's high, it might be a sign of dehydration, that you are not drinking enough. Then we are, of course, looking at calcium and magnesium. So it's not that we need to have high levels in the blood. However, calcium is also conducting, so for neurotransmitters in the brain. So we have these like calcium ions, and when they are released, it releases the neurotransmitters. So we need calcium, and also for the bones, and magnesium for nervous system, and many magnesium actually for 500 enzymatic reactions, because calcium and magnesium and zinc, all these minerals are cofactors in enzymatic reactions. And if we don't have sufficient amount of these building blocks, the body cannot work in a proper way. Then we are looking at total protein. Are you eating enough protein? We are looking at filtration rate of the kidneys, because kidneys are super important and you don't feel any pain until it is too late. And I always look at the glucose and metabolic markers. So fasting glucose, it's what your doctor would probably do on a regular basis, but glucose levels change all the time. If I now get completely under stress, my glucose levels are going to increase because my body thinks that I'm going to run away from the tiger, and therefore I will need to have more glucose to be able to run away. The marker that I am looking at is HbA1c, which is glycosylated hemoglobin, because this is how glucose have been in the bloodstream attaching to the hemoglobin, which is the protein in red blood cells, and it's like a sticky glue or syrup, and then it binds all the red blood cells together and it's damaging them. And high levels of glycosylated hemoglobin is a marker of pre-diabetes and diabetes, because this marker shows you what happened in your bloodstream in past 120 days. So that is more important for me than just fasting glucose. And I'm looking at fasting insulin, and this is not very often run by doctors, but I add it on my list, and in functional medicine, we definitely do it. And why? Because if you are fasting, you go early in the morning, you didn't eat, you didn't drink, fasting, okay, for minimum 12 hours, but preferably 16 hours. And insulin is a fat maker. It's an anabolic hormone, and insulin gets increased from beta cells in pancreas in reaction to blood glucose levels. But it does not happen just overnight or in one moment. If you are fasting and you have high levels of insulin, it is a sign of insulin resistance. It basically means that the cells are not sensitive to the signal. So insulin needs to open the gate so that the glucose can be taken inside the cell and turned into energy, adenosine triphosphate. And if this is not happening, the brain sends signal to the pancreas to release more insulin because it is not producing the energy. So high levels of insulin are showing pre-diabetes and maybe already diabetes, depending what levels you have. So whether you are metabolically active shows on the levels of fasting insulin. So for example, my fasting insulin is always low because I am avoiding carbohydrates as much as possible because I have a predisposition for diabetes. And this is the marker that I always check for me and all my clients. Now we are looking at lipid panel. And you can see, I mean, for me, remember this was just for me, it's basic because I have in the past done comprehensive tests. I have done also DNA tests for me. I know that I don't have any risk of cardiovascular disease, and I don't have any of the markers that would be high, like ApoB or LPA, which is like a genetic marker for the cardiovascular disease, or I don't have ApoA in my genetic test, the E4, E3. I just don't have it. So I am not running this for me. For me, I'm purely looking at the total cholesterol, LDL, which is the low density lipoprotein, which is a heavy golf ball that could, damage the endothelium and cause some inflammation. And then I'm looking at the HDL, which is basically using fat as a fuel. So it's taking the fat from the storage, brings it to the liver, and it can create ketones when I'm fasting. So that is the most important for me. And then triglycerides. So if I have in a fasted state, low triglycerides, I know that I don't have metabolic syndrome. I don't have any problem with my lipid panel. So I check this every single year. And then I'm looking at the liver markers. So we have this AST, ALT. So these are enzymes in the liver and other organs as well, like in the muscle, that show oxidative stress, liver damage, and so on. And on the other hand, if it's low, then you are not producing, you don't have enough liver enzymes and the signaling is not working in a proper way. Then you might have problems with low bile and so on. And then this alkaline phosphatase, it needs zinc. So when it's low, there might be potentially zinc deficiency. It's also a liver enzyme. Then I'm looking at GGT, which is very high when there is a toxicity, so heavy toxic metal like mercury. This is usually for people that have like some perfume sensitivity or sensitivity to anything, allergies and so on. So I always check that one as well. It should be under 10. So these liver enzymes. Then I'm looking at the inflammation. Again, for me, I'm looking only at high sensitivity CRP, and that needs to be like less than 1 because I'm 47, so I'm not giving myself 0. I know that there is going to be some oxidative stress and some damage in my body due to age, menopause, and so on. I'm also taking the hormone replacement therapy, so it will have impact on this. And I'm looking at morning cortisol because we know that stress is the root cause of any chronic disease. So I want to know how my adrenal glands react, especially in the morning. And then I'm looking at the nutrients and methylation. So what is methylation? You have maybe heard about it in some of my videos about the liver detoxification. So we have phase 1 when we activate the drugs and then we can absorb them well. And then we have phase 2 when we need to detoxify it and remove it from the body. And methylation is also like cleaning and making sure that the DNA doesn't get damaged and that we prevent cancer and other chronic disease. For this, for the methylation, we need B12, folate, vitamin D, which is the immune regulator, and we are looking at the levels of homocysteine. So homocysteine is one molecule in this methylation cycle, and when it's high, it means that we either don't have enough of the building blocks or the methylation cycle is not working well, and then we cannot create glutathione, which is a powerful antioxidant, and so on. So homocysteine in functional medicine, they say it should be less than 7. When I'm looking at my one, I think I was 8 or 8.7, which is not bad, but at one point in my perimenopausal years, I was 11 or 12. I did not supplement the B12, and that was a mistake. So now it's much, much, much better, and my vitamin D was also very good. Iron. I'm always looking at the iron status and not only ferritin. So ferritin, as I told you in other videos, is a protein storage of the iron in the liver. But what happens is that when we have inflammation in the body, pathogens, and so on, there is like any stress, the body naturally doesn't want to feed the pathogens and it blocks the storage of the iron and actually even transportation. And that's why I am looking at how much of the serum iron I have. This time I have extremely high levels. Maybe I was like supplementing before that or eating something that was high in iron. Usually this doesn't happen to me. Ferritin was just optimal. I think I had 87, which is optimal. And transferrin and transferrin saturation. So transferrin is a transporter of the iron into the ferritin, yes? And for this, we need copper. Copper is usually in every multivitamin if you are taking multivitamins. And the saturation is how many of the passengers iron sits in the taxi driver to be transported. And this sometimes is very low as well, as it was with my daughter, which is she's now supplementing iron and B12 because her levels at the age of 16 were under the limit where it should be in functional medicine. And I knew it because she was tired. But about this, I can tell you another time. And I always check for me thyroid. So thyroid is responsible for metabolism, but also for the signaling to ovaries and the whole endocrine system. If you have checked hormone yoga therapy that I'm teaching and doing workshop for, you know that we use, for example, the Ujjayi breath to activate the thyroid. But you also know from other videos about the immune system that the Epstein-Barr virus might be causing Hashimoto, and therefore you might have low levels of thyroid, and you might be having this hypothyroidism and supplementing synthetic T4, or maybe you have even a combined therapy with T3. I'm also checking the antibodies for me, again, to make sure that I don't have Hashimoto, which luckily is perfectly fine in my case. And then, of course, I am looking at sex hormones. I am looking at estradiol because I am using the estradiol gel, 1 pump, or actually 2 pumps now. I'm using 2 pumps, and I wanted to see if it's too much or if it's okay. It's perfectly fine. So I will continue taking 2 pumps, and I'm using utrogestan, so micronized progesterone, bioidentical 200 milligrams every evening. And even those levels were fine, actually on a lower level. Then sex hormone binding globulin is very high. This is actually good because it's storing the hormones inside and it will release it only when needed. Testosterone, I was checking testosterone even last time because last year my levels of testosterone were very high. Maybe the mistake was that I did the testing one day after a heavy hiking day, which can increase it. But I also lost some hair, and this is caused usually in perimenopause and menopause due to the high levels of testosterone that actually turn into DHT, dihydroxytestosterone, which is 10 times more potent. For this, I usually do the urinary test, like the Dutch test. But this time I didn't want to spend the money for this test, so I did the blood test for testosterone, and of course I'm using supplements that are suppressing the DHT. That's a natural supplement that I purchased, and it works pretty well. And then I'm checking the DHEA sulfated. So this is a youth hormone. It's from adrenal glands, and it's a precursor, for example, to testosterone or other hormones in the steroid pathway. Again, you would learn more about the steroidogenic pathway from the videos that I have about functional medicine, but not this basic blood test. And then I'm looking at LH and FSH. So it's a luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone. And obviously it comes from the brain. Higher the number, more you know that the brain is not satisfied with the function of the ovaries. So in perimenopause and menopause, it is absolutely normal that these levels are very high. And of course, even in my case, the brain is screaming because ovaries are not functioning anymore. I see this very often, even in women age 35, definitely at 40. So even though they say, oh, I still have regular menstrual cycle, the cycle is just getting heavier or slightly shorter, or sometimes I skip a period. I know that LH and FSH are going to be high. I also know that their anti-Müllerian hormone is high, and I also know that they will have no progesterone in a luteal phase. Yeah? And for this reason, as a prevention, I always recommend hormone yoga therapy, supplementation, building the muscle, and many, many, many other protocols that you will see in the hormone yoga therapy online course. So this was the letter that I wrote for myself, for my GP. She, without any problem, understood why I need it. She's always laughing because she says that this is very complex and very long. And it works. It works because I know where I am and what I need to repair. And just out of curiosity, you can see I eat super healthily. You can imagine I'm a functional medicine practitioner and nutritionist. But you can see that, for example, my iron levels were much higher than it should be. So then I have to think, okay, maybe I will take supplements that do not have iron, or maybe I take it every 3 days. My ferritin was just perfect. Even though this vitamin D, it's a holotranscobalamin, which shows how much active B12 I have. This time it's fine, but I know that I need to supplement all the time. But I also know that I'm at the risk of osteoporosis. That's why I'm going to do the DEXA scan. And you can see that before I had very high levels of free testosterone. This time they have done only the total testosterone, which was perfectly fine because it's bound to the sex hormone binding globulin. I can see that my follicle stimulating hormone is 36, but you know what? Before I started taking the hormone replacement therapy, it was 87, okay? It was extremely high. I had hot flushes, night sweats, I couldn't sleep well, I was gaining the weight. My mood was up and down, and I am so grateful that I ran the tests for me. I went to the gynecologist, I got the prescription, and everything is perfect. Yeah, this is much longer. I'm not going to show you everything. What I also want to talk, this is the last, the most important, is how do you prepare for the blood test? So minimum 5 days before that, you are not taking any supplements, because if you are taking supplements, they are going to show that you have sufficient amount in your bloodstream. What we want to see is how much of these vitamins and minerals are you able to absorb from the food. So remember, you need to digest the food well so that you can absorb it. And very often with my clients, even though they eat meat and they are eating food that is high in zinc, they're just not absorbing it. And then based on these results, we can decide if you are going to supplement. So remember, minimum 5 days without supplements, preferably 10 days without supplements. And if you do urinary test, it's also 10 days without supplements. And if you do stool test, it's 1 month without supplements and without any probiotics. Yeah? So 5 is minimum, 10 is optimal, 1 month for additional extremely expensive test, because if you pay for it, you really want to know where you stand. Other thing, of course, you are not going to drink any alcohol 2 days, 3 days before the tests, because otherwise your liver enzymes are going to be increased, your GGT is going to show the toxins. It's going to be false just because of a glass of wine. You don't want that. What else? You are going to drink water, pure water, 3 days before that, at least 2.5 liters of water, because we want to make sure that you are not dehydrated. Tea, herbal tea, all of that is fine, but it's always diuretic. And then it's going to show dehydration. It's going to show that maybe your kidneys are not working in a proper way. You don't want to see that. Just drink water. And with food, you also want to be a little bit careful, because some food might have like allergic reaction, so it might like increase your CRP and it might increase some other markers. So I always suggest like neutral food. So what is neutral food? So for example, brown rice, if you eat carbohydrates, okay, brown rice, and if you cool it down and then you reheat it, it's going to have like less carbohydrates than zucchini, courgette. It's super neutral. Carrot, yeah, cooked carrot. Green beans, even frozen green beans, chicken is absolutely fine. Eggs, if you don't have any lactose intolerance, maybe cottage cheese. But eat some protein, but avoid protein powders, because then it's going to show that you have high levels of protein, high levels of creatinine, high levels of maybe albumin, and so on. So again, it would be like masking the normal system of your body. Yeah, so no alcohol, no excessive sport, because if you over exercise, you go to run a marathon or something like that, you are going to have damaged liver, leaky gut, increased inflammation, because it's healing the muscles. So avoid this. Preferably avoid massive stress. So if you know that you have exams or something, or you are studying or you are not sleeping, that is not the best time to test. When we talk about menstruation, if you are going to do the progesterone levels, progesterone you always do 7 days after ovulation. So let's say it's day 21. Yeah. If your cycle is 28 days, it's day 21. If your cycles are shorter, let's say 21 days, then it might be day 12, for example. Yeah, you need to calculate. You know when you ovulate, you are maybe with Oura ring measuring your temperature, or you are checking the vaginal mucus. You understand your body a little bit, so it's 7 days after the ovulation. And if you don't understand your body, again, hormone yoga therapy videos explain everything about the menstrual cycle, how to track it, how to know. Because remember, you want to be the master of your health and the captain of your soul, and that's why I'm here to help you.